without the United States' active role and its superiority militarily in the Asia-Pacific region since 1945, the economies, the nations and the economies of East Asia would never have achieved the high rates of growth that they've achieved. They would never have achieved the level of prosperity that they've achieved, because East Asia would never have achieved the stability that it's achieved. And so from the perspective of a country like Australia, we are enormously grateful to the generosity and the support of the people of the United States and the governments of the United States for stability within the Asia-Pacific region. Clearly it's in the United States' interest to contribute to the stability of the region. There's no doubt about that. The second point I'd make in terms of United States military strength, security strength, is that it has played a role in recent years which, if the United States had not played that role, if the United States had pursued the old policy of isolationism that it once pursued, would have left a vacuum. How, for example, would the problems of the Balkans have been addressed if it hadn't been for the United States? What would Europe have done to stabilize the Balkans during the 1990s if it hadn't been for the United States? Today, with the issue of terrorism, of course, there will be those who will argue, I think quite wrongly, and without any understanding of the real causes of terrorism, that the United States is responsible for the terrorism that is emerging. It's not. That terrorism, particularly fundamentalist Islamic terrorism, is above all directed at trying to impose theocratic Taliban-style regimes in moderate Islamic states, and that is the raison d'etre of that terrorism. The United States is seen as an obstacle to achieving that objective, but that is not, the United States is not the ultimate target of that terrorism. But the United States is a country that has a capacity to respond to and to deal with that problem in a way that no other country does.
The sole superpower has responsibilities. The US as a country, member of the community of nations, can take whatever position they deem necessary vis-à-vis this or that problem. But as the superpower, the only one, the omnipotent power, this puts a responsibility, a different responsibility, that should prevent the American policy, the leading policy in the world, from taking positions based on double standard or total alliance to the position of one party against the other, because this would introduce immediately an imbalance, serious imbalance in international or regional politics. With the omnipotence of the United States, we feel, and I believe many would agree with me, that resentment is growing worldwide. Resentment against positions taken in the political sphere, or even in the vis-à-vis situations, treaties, positions taken by the United States in the environmental field, the economic, social, etc. Now, what kind of policy, of attitude that the superpower, the omnipotent power, should, in my humble opinion, follow? I believe the consensus, promoting consensus among nations, be it in a region, on the regional level or international level, is important. Consensus, not the acquiescence. The US should not work for or demand acquiescence, but work by consensus. This would benefit the field of human rights, would benefit the campaign against international terrorism, the processes of peace, and processes of cooperation among nations. This is a very, very serious responsibility, and a superpower, an omnipotent, has to be highly responsible.
The other idea I want to talk briefly upon is Iraq. There is no question that the United States is using its military power to dictate its own solution on Iraq, but even with that, I think the United States found it necessary to go to the UN and seek a resolution back in September. And therefore, I think we do have an answer to U.S. omnipotence, which is multilateralism. But it can't be passive multilateralism. It has to be a proactive multilateralism by the rest of the world, presenting ideas all the time, taking matters into their own hands and trying to define their own future. I would guard against talk about that we've heard before about reshaping of the region. That is not omnipotence. That crosses the line and it becomes arrogance, frankly. The United States cannot dictate how other countries want to live without the consent of those peoples. The United States can certainly help people around the world have a better future for themselves, but to talk about reshaping the region and introducing systems without the consent of the people concerned becomes arrogance and not omnipotence.
Let us make a small experiment, intellectual experiment. Let us imagine that United States would disappear tomorrow. And I have a question. Whether the world would be more secure than today? Whether the stability in the world would be higher than today? And that means that if we are talking about omnipotence, we would have to understand that there is more threat, the impotence of the United States. That's a reality of our life today, and we must be very careful and very cautious about that. I understand that today is the key problem is Iraq problem. If to deal with this problem and if to make the first step to help, I would say that it is an ultimate goal to solve two problems, to transform the regime of Saddam Hussein and to make it secure and to avoid the war. This is the two things which must be done. And the discussion, war or no war, is a wrong dilemma, in fact. So it is necessary to create enormous military pressure, but to avoid the war.
I'm sure that the presence of the American military since 1945 has had a great deal to do with the stability in East Asia and possibly in other parts of the world. But again, to make Mr. Yavlinsky's point, that was the last century, and we now are, I don't really know what use our great military machine is when presented with the possibility of a nuclear weapon in a suitcase. I can understand that we are prepared to meet the Soviet tanks in the Fulda Gap, but I'm not so sure we're prepared to meet Al-Qaeda in Miami Beach or in Bali. We made a number of mistakes over the last 50 years where we've shown up on the side of the despot, whether that's Chile, Guatemala, Angola, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Vietnam. We've been on the wrong side for too many years. We're not on the side of liberty.
Why do we need a military? Think North Korea. Think of 100 nuclear devices that could come to your country. Think of Iraq. In 1991, we knew they were within 6 months of developing a nuclear device. We don't know where they are now. We know they have chemical and biological capabilities, if not weapons. We knew they did when the inspectors left last time. We're not sure where they are now. Those could end up in your country. These are all things that a military has a role in, as we're seeing. We can differ as to how much consultation there should be, and that was an excellent point, I thought, made by Secretary General Moussa. But at some point, consultation means delay, and you cannot handle some of the very urgent problems that we face. And the United States believes, obviously, that the problem in Iraq is an urgent problem. I do too. I think it's an imminent threat. We have consulted. We have gone to the United Nations. We have gone to NATO. We have received resolutions. We are still in the process of trying to determine what the inspectors will find and determine what the next step is. But to say the United States has acted unilaterally is just not accurate. If the United States were not engaged in the world, I think the world would be a less good place for many reasons. We talked about what would happen with regard to the Asian Pacific area or the Middle East or other areas, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it has to do with a more prosperous and a free world.